Monday everybody, today I will speak about a functional definition of ethics. From the practical point of view, the necessity to define what is ethics implies psychological, social, economic and productive consequences. Since it influences and determines the individual and community choices, if not correctly interpreted, it can drive to form of deprivation. A state, a government, following a distorted ethical analysis, can do limited legislative choices impairing the productiveness of an economic sector for a region, for example. From the point of view of the individual, following an ethical approach, a wrong ethical approach, can compromise his or her own social relationship and then her own psychological health. Considering, for example, choices such as veganism or even more orthorexia, reduce the possibility to a complete and intense social life, if only for the uneasiness of eating next to someone who consumes a product considered not ethical or communicate with someone who does not share the same ideological orientation. Here I speak usually in terms of if ethics kills you. So sometimes ethics, a wrong ethics can bring you to death. This is the extreme point of arrive, but sometimes in the easiest part of life can be only a life not complete. It requires, then, to find a new definition starting on what the classical point of view means for ethics and the evaluation of some conceptual implications. Generally, ethics is, in philosophy, the doctrine that is interested in the human behavior, and very often it is intended as synonymous of morality, and that is not the right way to do it. We can introduce here a first characterizing element in our reasoning, namely the clear separation of the concepts of ethics and morality. Here we assume for morality the ethics of society. In other words, the term stands for the behavior of a society or a part of this society, or again, the summation on average of single behaviors. We call ethics instead the inspirational assumption of the individual behavior. According to classical philosophy, ethics and morality are linked to the concepts of good and evil, right and wrong. So these particular terms are an indication that we are in the field of ethics and morality. This approach still remains popular in contemporary literature, emphasizing on the definition of ethics considered as a filter that distinguishes between the behavior a person has to follow or to avoid in the name of good and evil. This view seems puerile, insufficient, since good and evil, are not something absolute, because they are depending on the reference given. If the reference is changed, the assessment changes. A Stoic idea of ethics prevents in everyday life to analyze the situation in which one person can come across, sending continuously the brain in short circuits, especially if related to individual behaviors. For example, a deviant with reference to Gaussian distribution of social behavior, would be therefore someone without ethics. Nevertheless, we know that violent individuals, even though in a negative sense, have their own personal ethics, just like, in a positive way, vegetarians have it that are themselves deviant from the mass. And these deviants are a part of world biodiversity that many times everybody invoke as an element of richness for biology, society, economy, etc., etc. In synthesis, we must understand that everybody has an ethics, even the most ruthless assassin. An ethics that certainly is not in accordance with the morality of Catholic religion. And defining someone without ethics, meaning that he has no more values, is conceptually wrong. It would be better to say that he is without morality, where the term morality is intended as the set of rules considered right for the social group in which the judging subject finds his reference. And it is this ethics, personal to each one of us, that gives the measure to personal and others' behaviors. For many authors exists a morality in the absolute sense that we can identify with common elements among the various theories. However, here we state that the mere possibility to find strong commonalities among the different ethics and morality theories does not justify the assumption that an absolute morality exists, but instead it tells us that the human genetic code requires a specific form of behavior and perception of the world. With the evolution of human being and his discoveries, there is the creation of new brain connections that allow, from one side, to accept the new form of behavior, and from the other side, require the review of the traditional ones. In any case, not always these reviews occur in all social subjects, neither the behavior will remain stable over the time. In fact, society is varied in its components and, with globalization, also in its groups. Then there may be a common morality, but it is marked by dynamic components related to cultural, technological, and developmental movement of the society itself. Some authors identify three principles that are present in the ethic matrix and in human behavior. They are well-being, autonomy, and fairness, and are applied to the interest of the different groups related to the problem being analyzed. But we have to say that these components of human ethics are such only because the social equilibrium passes through them. Our brain is structured to follow this principle in the society a person lives, and so for himself, and in some degree, these are principles required also to the others. These three pillars can be more or less respected by the people in an analyzed ethical case. However, the infringements of these rules are common, both from the individuals and the society. These phenomena are absolutely normal, but also desirable otherwise the human race would be doomed to extinction. To understand this better, even if there are ethical and moral rules, the various social agents do not apply them consistently, and those who try to strictly follow them very often suffer from neurosis. The really important thing instead is that the breaches are hidden. They are to be disguised, justified, or not perceived for the preservation of social equilibrium or the personal equilibrium of the subject who does these actions. Thinking that normal rules are important to reduce violence, injustice, and exploitation is an approach that hasn't scientific basis. Ethical rules are needed to get better accept what is happening around us and to justify various forms of violence and coercion. However, sharing or not what said up until now, the idea of existence of an absolute ethics appear inconsistent. Believing that in a soul ethics that is the same for everybody is a conceptual wrong approach from the biological and intellectual point of view, with a consequence to invalidate the entire analysis. In fact, it is difficult to find books about ethics that help to solve existential doubts. It is quite likely that they are creating for new ones instead. If we still investigate in ethics focusing on the function in human behavior, we have to consider the individual and his mindset extendable to society. We have already pointed out that morality should be interpreted only as an average of the possible forms of behavior given the heterogeneity of the behaviors themselves that come out from the overlapping of different moralities and culture. For example, due to globalization, both economic and globalization of knowledge, and migration of people from different countries, morality nowadays is constantly evolving, and that is why we are continuously internal and external conflict in the societies. The behavior is nothing else than the outcome of a connection of neurons at brain levels. This connection and nervous pathways, named also brain circuits, are determined by genetics, natural environment, social environment, and their mutual interaction, which make possible and accepted behaviors themselves. This leads to our definition of ethics. Finally, we arrive to our definition of ethics, intended as the origin of behaviors allowed by our minds that are able to maintain in psychological equilibrium the subject. From this idea of ethics can be drawn the definition of morality, seen as the sum of behaviors codified and adopted by the society or by a part of the society. If for ethics we have spoken about individual psychological equilibrium, at the social level, the desired balance is identifiable with the maintenance of conflicts at an acceptable level in the society. For a sufficient part of the population offer the most part of its opinion leaders. Anyway, the society is looking for the maintenance of the conflicts at an acceptable level. It seems appropriate here reiterate that ethics concern the allowed behaviors by the individual. both those made or those perceived, for example, made by others or virtually proposed by media, while morality concerns the behaviors approved by the society or a social group to whom one refers. In short, the morality is the ethics of a society, in the broadest sense of the term, and ironically, it could also exist for any animal society. The choice of some authors to use interchangeably the term of ethics and morality then isn't satisfying in the name of the new perspective, even though never discuss that I propose, which lead us to identify an inclusive definition for the theories considered till now. This is neural ethics. So we put together the history of philosophy with the neural sciences, and so we have a neural ethics. Understanding ethics through neurosciences and various neural theories, including the biological approach, can lead us towards the deep roots and the whys of the human behavior, drawing on the neural structure which determines the approach to the world. This suggests that each of us has a different representation of the world because we are genetically different from each other. Genetically different from each other, and this is carried out by the number of connections formed and by their own plasticity. So, also the personal ethics changes for each us, even though referring to external elements upon which it structure. The external elements are culture and morality. In fact, we know that ethics changes within ethnic groups and with the evolution of human race, because it changes the representation of external environment and at the neuronal level. It also changes with the technology because there is the introduction of new stimuli that can alter the earlier perception of things or the suggestion of new behavior. Just think about how sociality has been deeply changed by the introduction of internet, mobile phones, television, computer, and everything else, like we can say, or the advent of more advanced analytical techniques such as in the clinical fields, which gave a representation of phenomena that are not detectable by our organs, for example, eyes, our organs of sense, that brings them back within a form that can be instead normally detected and processed. With the new knowledge of the phenomena, our perception changes and consequently also our ethics does. To recall an example more related to the topics of these video pamphlets, we remember that vegetarianism is a part of this trend. Indeed, the perception of animals, but also plants, is different from person to person and may change with increasing of personal knowledge influencing behavior. Well, thank you everybody for listening. That's all for now. Mandi to everybody.